It was a cold Tuesday morning in San Francisco. The sky was still painted in sleepy gray, and the streets were mostly quiet, with only the distant hum of traffic and the soft shuffle of early risers walking briskly with coffee in hand. Most people passed by without looking up, their minds already tangled in emails, meetings, and things that seemed urgent but would be forgotten by evening. But for one man, this day would be different. For one man, today would change everything. His name was Thomas. He sat near the corner of Market Street, wearing a coat that was 2 sizes too big and shoes that had long given up trying to protect his feet. His hands trembled not just from the cold, but from something deeper, hunger, exhaustion, and that quiet ache of being invisible for too long. Thomas wasn't always homeless. Not long ago, he had a job, a family, and dreams that felt possible. But life has a way of folding in on people who don't expect it. One illness, one lost paycheck, one heartbreak, and he found himself slipping. He had asked people for help before. A sandwich, a blanket, sometimes even just a smile. Most didn't stop. Many didn't even see him. But Thomas never asked for money. He felt it made people uncomfortable, like it turned him into someone he wasn't. But today, something inside him cracked. Maybe it was the cold. Maybe it was the look on a little girl's face who pointed at him before her mother quickly pulled her away. Or maybe it was the fact that he hadn't eaten in 2 days. So he stood up slowly, his knees creaking like old wooden doors. He didn't know where he was walking. His legs just carried him forward. And then at the crosswalk, he saw a man standing alone, waiting for the light to change. The man was dressed simply. Jeans, sneakers, a jacket that looked comfortable but not loud. He was staring at his phone, maybe reading a message, maybe thinking deeply. Something about him felt calm, peaceful, like he wasn't in a hurry. Thomas didn't recognize him. Not at first. He walked up, cleared his throat softly, and asked the question that would become the beginning of everything. Sir, could you give me $1? The man looked up. His eyes were kind, not surprised, not irritated, not scared, just kind. And then he smiled. $1? He asked gently. Thomas nodded, suddenly feeling foolish. Maybe he should have asked for food instead. Maybe this man thought he was trying to scam him. The man put his phone away, slid his hands into his pockets, and tilted his head, as if thinking about something deeply important. What will you do with $1? He asked. The question felt strange. Thomas wasn't expecting it, wasn't ready to explain. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came. The man didn't press him. He waited patiently, as if time had slowed down just for this moment. Maybe some bread, Thomas finally said. Or maybe a coffee. Something warm. The man nodded. His face changed slightly, not with pity, but with something else. Like understanding. And then, instead of pulling out $1, the man asked, "Do you know who I am?" Thomas looked closer. There was something familiar now. The voice. The calm confidence. He had seen this man somewhere, maybe in a newspaper. Left on a bench or a video someone had shown him once. No. Thomas said honestly. The man smiled again. But this time it was softer. My name is Sundar. Sundar Pichai. Thomas blinked. The name didn't register right away. I work in tech. Sundar added, almost as if it was an afterthought. Thomas didn't know much about tech. He knew how to use a phone, barely, and he knew that people in tech made money, but he didn't know who Sundar Pichai was. And Sundar didn't seem to mind that at all. What's your name? Sundar asked. Thomas, he replied quietly. Sundar looked around. Would you walk with me for a bit, Thomas? And just like that, they began walking together down Market Street. One man in worn shoes, the other in sneakers that had probably never stepped in a shelter. It wasn't flashy. There were no cameras. No one noticed them. And yet, for Thomas, it felt like walking beside a quiet storm, something powerful, something steady, something that could move mountains without raising its voice. As they walked, Sundar asked questions. Where are you from? What did you used to do? Do you like music? Thomas answered as best he could. At first, his voice was unsure. But Sundar never interrupted. He just listened. really listened. And slowly, Thomas found himself remembering things he hadn't said in years. Stories about his childhood. The way his mother used to sing while cooking. The time he built a treehouse with his father. Memories that had been buried under months of silence and concrete. They stopped in front of a small cafe. "Wait here," Sundar said. Thomas stood awkwardly, unsure if he should leave. A few minutes later, Sundar returned not with $1, but with 2 hot coffees and a bag with fresh pastries inside. "I didn't know what kind you like," Sundar said, "so I got one of everything." They sat on a bench nearby. And they ate. And for the first time in a long time, Thomas laughed. It wasn't a loud laugh. Just a small cracked sound that came from deep inside. Sundar smiled, but didn't say anything. He just let Thomas be. Let the moment breathe. After they finished, Sundar asked a question that made Thomas stop breathing for a second. "What if, I told you that your story is not over?" Thomas looked at him. "What do you mean?" Sundar said. "What? If this is just the middle of the story, not the end." Thomas looked down at his hands. "I don't have anything left. No job, no home. I'm just..." "You're Thomas," Sundar interrupted gently. "You're a person, not a mistake, not a burden." The wind picked up slightly, brushing against their faces. "Why are you helping me?" Thomas asked. Sundar looked at him, his eyes clear and steady. "Because someone helped me once, and because I believe in what people can become, not just what they've been." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Sundar stood up and reached into his pocket. Thomas expected money. But Sundar pulled out a card. "If you ever want to talk again," he said, handing over, "this is my assistant's number. Tell her you met me here. Tell her your name, Shino." Thomas took the card like it was glass. Sundar smiled one last time, nodded, and began walking away. Thomas watched him go, unsure if this had really happened or if the cold had finally made him dream strange things. But he felt something different now. Not just the warmth of the coffee in his stomach, but something quieter. Deeper. Hope. A fragile, flickering thing. He looked at the card again. And he whispered to himself, "What if he's right?" But before Thomas could even begin to wonder what came next, something happened that neither he nor Sundar could have expected. A black car pulled up beside the bench. A man stepped out. He wasn't smiling, and he was looking straight at Thomas. Said, "You need to come with me." And just like that, everything shifted again. Thomas stared at the man in front of him. He was tall, maybe in his late 30s, dressed in a black coat that looked expensive, too clean for the sidewalk. The car he had stepped out of was sleek, with dark-tinted windows and no license plate Thomas could see. It idled by the curb like a silent predator, the engine barely making a sound. "You need to come with me," the man repeated, his voice calm but firm. Thomas's grip on Sundar's card tightened. Everything in him wanted to ask who this man was or what he meant. But for a moment, fear overpowered reason. This wasn't normal. This wasn't part of the plan. Was there even a plan? "Why?" Thomas asked quietly, barely above a whisper. The man's eyes flicked to the card in Thomas's hand. His face didn't change, but his voice dropped lower. "It's not a request." For the first time in a long time, Thomas felt a different kind of cold. Not the kind that came from wind or hunger, but the kind that wrapped around your spine. When you knew something was wrong, when you were no longer in control of what happened next. He glanced down the street. Sundar was gone. The man hadn't followed him, hadn't even looked in his direction. But now Thomas wished he had memorized which way Sundar had walked. "I don't know who you are," Thomas said, trying to keep his voice steady. "But I'm not going anywhere." The man didn't move. He simply reached into his coat, and Thomas flinched. But instead of a weapon, the man pulled out a small black phone. He tapped it once, then held it out. "Listen," he said. Thomas hesitated. Then he leaned closer. The voice that came from the phone stopped him cold. "Thomas," said Sundar's voice, calm and warm. "It's okay. Go with him." The message ended there. No explanation. No comfort. Just that simple sentence. And now Thomas Didn't know what to feel. Dot asterisk. The man didn't say anything else. He opened the back door of the car and waited. The cold air seeped deeper into Thomas's coat as he stood on the sidewalk, torn between fear and something stranger dash curiosity. What did Sundar mean? Why would he send someone? What could he possibly want from someone like Thomas? Slowly, cautiously, Thomas stepped forward and slid into the back seat. The door shut behind him like the seal on a vault. Inside. The car was warm, almost too warm. The windows were tinted from the inside too, blocking out most of the city. Thomas felt like he had just been pulled out of the real world and into something quieter. Something hidden. The man got into the driver's seat, put the car in motion, and didn't speak for several minutes. Thomas looked around. There were no logos, no GPS, no music playing. Just the soft hum of tires against pavement. Asterisk. Finally, Thomas asked, "Where are we going?" The driver didn't turn his head. "To someone who wants to meet you." Who? Someone Sundar trusts. That didn't help much. But it was more than nothing. The streets changed. They weren't in the heart of downtown anymore. Buildings grew further apart. Neighborhoods turned into quiet, tree-lined roads with gated homes and driveways guarded by silent cameras. Eventually, the car turned down a long private road lined with tall hedges. At the end stood a modest house, 2 stories, clean windows, a garden that looked carefully maintained. It wasn't a mansion, but it had the kind of duty money usually bought. The car stopped inside. The driver said. Thomas stepped out slowly. He walked toward the front door, his legs uncertain, his mind racing. The door opened. Before he could knock. A woman stood there. Maybe in her 50s, wearing a soft sweater and jeans, her hair pulled back in a loose bun. She smiled in a way that made the tension in Thomas's chest ease slightly. "You must be Thomas," she said. "Come in." He followed her inside. The house smelled like cinnamon and fresh bread. It felt warm, like it had been lived in. Not a showpiece. Not something staged. They sat in the living room. She handed him tea. "My name is Elena," she said. "I used to work with Sundar a long time ago." Thomas held the mug tightly, grateful for the warmth, but still confused. "Why am I here?" "Yes." She leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees. "Because Sundar believes in second chances," she said. "And so do I." He didn't speak. He just waited. She continued. "Every year, Sundar quietly picks one person. Just one. Someone he meets by chance. Someone who reminds him of what really matters. And he gives that person something almost no one else will this time." Thomas blinked. "Why me?" Elena smiled gently. "Because you didn't ask for money." "Not really. You asked for dignity." And Sundar noticed. Those words felt like stones dropped into a still pond inside Thomas. "He saw something in you," she said. "And now he wants to help. If you want help." Thomas set the mug down slowly. "Help how?" Elena reached into a drawer beside her and pulled out a folder. Inside were papers. His name, his background, job history, even a list of shelters he had stayed at. At first it felt like an invasion, but then he saw something else. A letter. Typed. It was from Sundar. "Dear Thomas, you asked me for $1, but I believe your worth is far more than that. Enclosed is a plan. If you choose, we will help you. Get a place to stay, a job training program, clothes, food. We will ask for nothing in return. Except this, that one day when you are ready, you will help someone else the same way. Your story matters." And this is not the end. Sundar Thomas couldn't read the rest. His eyes were wet now. He hadn't cried in a long time. He looked up at Elena. She didn't say anything. She just waited. Why would he do this? Thomas whispered. "Because he remembers," she said softly. "He remembers what it feels like to be small, to be unsure, and he knows that no one climbs alone." Thomas closed the folder. He sat in silence for a long time. Then he said, "I want to try." Elena smiled. "Then we begin now." And just like that, Thomas's new chapter began. Over the next few weeks, everything changed. He was taken to a quiet housing center just outside the city. Not a shelter, an actual room with clean sheets, a desk, and a window that caught the sunrise each morning. For the first time in years, he slept through the night without being cold. He joined a work training program. He met mentors. He started therapy. Even though he was scared to open up, each day felt like climbing a mountain. Small, painful steps, but he took them and slowly. The man who had once stood on Market Street with nothing but a question began to come alive again. But just when Thomas thought the worst was behind him, something unexpected happened. He was walking home from a job interview, a real one, at a company that actually cared about who he was. Not just what he could do. When someone called his name from across the street, he turned out it was a man he hadn't seen in a long time, someone from his past, someone who didn't know the new Thomas, and the look in the man's eyes was not kind. You think you can run? The man shouted, stepping into the street. You think you can just disappear? And in that moment, Thomas realized something. His past wasn't done with him yet, and the next chapter wouldn't be about survival without it. Would be about facing the truth. Asterisk, the sound of tires screeched in the distance as Thomas froze on the sidewalk. His heart beating faster than it had in months. He had heard that voice before. He had felt that same tightness in his chest before. The kind that warns you danger doesn't always come from the dark, but sometimes from your own past. The man was crossing the street with eyes that burned, his steps quick and angry, his hands clenched like he was holding years of blame in his fists. Thomas didn't move. Part of him wanted to turn and run. But another part, the newer part, the one that had grown since the day he met Sundar, held him still. Because he had made a promise, even if only to himself, no more running. Not from pain, not from shame, and especially not from who he used to be. The man stepped onto the curb, close now. Thomas could see the lines on his face, the way time and bitterness had carved into his expression. The man's name was Derek. Thomas knew exactly why he was angry. You got nerve? Showing your face around here, Derek spat. People passed by but didn't stop. Just two men standing in public, but the silence between them was sharp. Derek, Thomas said softly. He remembered the last time they'd spoken. It was late at night, in the back of a warehouse where they both used to work. Thomas had borrowed money more than he could pay back. Things had spiraled from there. Shouting, threats. Thomas had disappeared a week later. And now, years later, Derek was standing in front of him again, like the past had decided to drag itself back into the light. You think you get a fresh start? Just because you shave, put on clean clothes? Derek hissed. You think people like you get to walk away from the mess you left behind? Thomas felt the shame rise inside him like smoke. But he didn't look away. I know I hurt people. Thomas said, I know I made mistakes. Derek scoffed. Mistakes? You owed me $300? I lost my job over that fight. I lost my apartment. I lost everything too, Thomas said, voice steady. But I'm trying to make it right now. There was a pause. Then Derek took a step closer. Make it right? With what? Charity money? Some rich guy's pity? With honesty, Thomas said. With work. With showing up every day, even when it's hard. His voice didn't waver. That surprised Derek. He didn't back off, but he looked uncertain for the first time. Look, Thomas said, I can't erase what happened, but I can offer something else. Not excuses, just truth. I'm not that man anymore. Derek stared at him. The anger was still there, but something else was breaking through. Disappointment, confusion, maybe even pain. You really changed? Derek asked, voice lower now. I'm trying, Thomas said. And if I ever get back on my feet for real, you'll be the first person I pay back. A silence settled over them. Finally, Derek turned to leave. We'll see, he muttered. But if you're lying, don't expect to vanish next time. He walked away, hands in his pockets, shoulders tense. Thomas stood still for a moment, letting the chill of the evening settle over his skin. He didn't know what had just happened, whether it was closure or a warning, maybe both, but he had faced it. And something in his chest felt lighter. He walked home slowly that evening, Thinking of everything, Sundar, Elena, the program, Derek. How fragile healing could be. How easy it was for old wounds to open. But he also thought about how, in the face of anger, he didn't lie, he didn't make excuses. He told the truth, and that had to mean something. A few days later, Thomas got a call. It was Elena. How did the interview go? She asked. He smiled. I got the job. The line went quiet. Then he heard her breathe out in relief. You earned that. She said. The job was at a logistics company, entry level. But it came with stability, a supportive manager, and coworkers who didn't know anything about Thomas's past. They only saw who he showed up as every day. And that was enough. Every morning, Thomas took the same bus. He sat by the window. He carried lunch in a brown paper bag. He wore a watch Sundar had given him as a quiet gift, a simple leather-strap piece that told more than time. It reminded him that someone had believed in him when no one else did. Weeks passed. His room at the housing center became something closer to home. He began saving money. He attended group therapy twice a week. He started smiling more often. But deep down, something still lingered. Not doubt, something else. A question that had sat with him since the day Sundar walked away on that sidewalk. Why? Why him? One afternoon, after his shift ended early, Thomas walked into a small bookstore near the edge of the city. He liked the quiet there. The way books lined the walls like unspoken conversations. He found his seat near the back and pulled out a notebook. He had started writing again. Nothing fancy. Just memories, thoughts, sometimes a poem, though he'd never call it that. As he scribbled. The bell above the door rang. He didn't look up. But then he heard a familiar voice. I heard this place had good coffee. He turned around. It was Sundar. Standing there, holding 2 cups. He walked over and handed one to Thomas. Thomas stood up, stunned. You're here? Sundar smiled. I told you your story wasn't over. They sat down. For a few moments. Neither said anything. They just sipped their drinks. It felt like a pause in a song. A breath before the next verse. Why do you help me? Thomas asked finally. Sundar looked at him, his expression thoughtful. When I was younger, he said, I was quiet. I watched more than I spoke. People didn't see me. Not really. But one teacher did. She told me I was more than what I came from. She told me I had something to offer. He paused, then added, I never forgot how that felt. And I decided if I ever had the power to give that feeling to someone else, I'd do it. Thomas looked down at the cup in his hands. I didn't feel like I had anything left, he said quietly. You had your name? Sundar said. Your honesty, your pain, and your hope. Those are more valuable than most people realize. They sat together for a while talking about life, about the future, about what it meant to rebuild, not from scratch, but from scars. Before Sundar left, he said one more thing. The time is coming soon. He said, when someone will ask you for help, Thomas looked up, and you'll know exactly what to do. He left the bookstore. And Thomas sat in silence, because somewhere deep inside, he already knew Sundar was right. But he didn't know how soon that moment would come. And when it did, it would test everything. His patience, his growth, and his promise. 3 months passed. The cold bite of winter had softened into spring, and Thomas felt the change not only in the weather, but in himself. Every morning when he woke up, he no longer felt like he was borrowing time from a life that didn't belong to him. He felt present. He felt, for the first time in years, like a man standing on solid ground. His job at the logistics company had become more than just work. It became a rhythm. He learned fast. He stayed late when needed. He asked questions. And his supervisor, a quiet woman named Jenny, noticed. She didn't compliment him often, but when she did, it meant something. She'd leave small, sticky notes on his locker, like, good eye on that missed barcode today, or thanks for staying calm during the shipment delay. Every note felt like a piece of the old Thomas being put back in place. After work, he kept to a routine. He'd walk to the park near the housing center. Sometimes he read. Sometimes he wrote. Sometimes he just watched parents playing with their kids, couples laughing, joggers breathing hard through earbuds. He liked watching life move. He liked remembering that even when he felt stuck, the world kept turning. And now, for the first time, he felt like he was turning with it. But on a Wednesday afternoon, something happened that would turn his life again. Only this time, it would test everything he'd rebuilt. He had just stepped off the bus after a long shift. His back ached, but his spirit was light. He had gotten his first paycheck with a bonus. Not much, but enough to put a little extra in savings and maybe buy something nice for himself, maybe a new pair of shoes. Since the ones he wore were still. From the shelter dazed Dot as he turned the corner toward the housing center, he noticed a figure sitting on the bench across the street. Dot at first. He didn't look closely, but then he saw the shaking hands, the thin frame, the hollow eyes, and the cardboard. Sign. Anything helps. Hungry. Cold. Please. He froze, not because he had never seen someone homeless before, but because this man looked familiar, too. Familiar. His skin crawled. He crossed the street slowly. The man didn't look up. He was wearing a hoodie pulled low over his face. And the way he curled into himself reminded Thomas of someone trying to disappear. He stopped in front of him. Double quotes. Mike? The man flinched. His head turned. And yes, Thomas saw it now. Mike. His younger brother. But this was not the Mike he remembered. The last time Thomas saw him was nearly 4 years ago. Back then, Mike had a job, a girlfriend, and a temper that boiled. Just under the surface. They hadn't spoken since the day Thomas vanished, unable to face the shame of who he'd become. He left without a word. No goodbye. No explanation. And now, here he was, sitting on a bench with a sign that Thomas himself could have written just months ago. Mike blinked, confused. Then his eyes widened. Thomas? Thomas sat down next to him, slowly, like approaching a wounded animal. Neither of them spoke at first. Mike looked rough, gaunt. His hoodie had holes, and his shoes were barely holding together. His fingers trembled from the cold, or something worse. What happened? Thomas asked, voice barely steady. Mike laughed bitterly. It wasn't a real laugh. More like a breath cracked in half. What happened? He repeated. You happened. Thomas? Swallowed hard. Mike turned to him. You left? Mom got sick. I lost the job trying to take care of her. She died, and you were gone. Those words hit Thomas like a punch to the stomach. He hadn't known. No one had told him. He had run so far, so fast, he'd shut every door behind him without thinking what he'd left inside. Mike, he whispered. I'm so sorry. Mike looked away. Yeah, well, sorry doesn't buy dinner. Thomas reached into his coat, pulled out his wallet and offered a few bills. Mike looked at the money, then at Thomas. What's this? Pity. It's food, Thomas said. Warmth. Mike took the money, but his hands trembled worse now. And Thomas could see something in his brother's eyes he hadn't expected. Shame. Not anger. Not bitterness. Just raw, open shame. And Thomas knew that feeling all too well. Come with me, Thomas said. Please, just for a night. I'll get you cleaned up. Get food. You don't have to stay. Just one night. Mike didn't answer. He looked down at the sidewalk, and Thomas saw a tear hit the concrete. They walked in silence back to the housing center. Thomas pulled some strings. Explained things. Mike got a bed for the night, a hot meal, a long shower, clean clothes. And when he came out of the bathroom wrapped in a towel, Thomas almost didn't recognize him. He looked like a man who had nearly drowned and was still coughing up water. They sat on the edge of the bed. Why are you helping me? Mike asked. Thomas took a deep breath. Because someone helped me when I didn't deserve it, when I had nothing. Mike stared at him. Who? A man, Thomas said. His name is Sundar. Mike scoffed lightly. Sounds made up. Thomas smiled. He's real. And because of him, I got a second chance. Now, I think it's your turn. Mike leaned forward, elbows on his knees. What if I mess up? Then we keep going, Thomas said. We fall. We get back up. Together. A pause. Then Mike nodded slowly. And in that moment, Thomas saw something that made his throat tighten. Hope. Small. Flickering. But alive. In the days that followed. Thomas helped Mike enroll in the same recovery and job readiness program he had gone through. They walked the same halls. Met the same mentors. Mike resisted at first. He was angry, broken, full of pride that cracked around the edges. But Thomas stayed close. He showed up. Every day. And one evening, as they sat outside under the soft glow of a street lamp, Mike asked him a question. You ever think about her? Mom? Thomas said. Mike nodded. Thomas was quiet for a while. Every day, he said. I think about what I missed. What I should have done differently. She'd be proud of you, Mike said suddenly. I didn't see it before. But I see it now. Those words made Thomas look away, his eyes stinging. She'd be proud of you too. He said. And they sat there. Two brothers. Not healed. Not whole, but finally walking the same path again. But just when Thomas began to believe things were settling, when he thought maybe this was the calm part of the story, a letter arrived. Hand dash. Delivered. No stamp. No name on the envelope. Just 3 words. Written in clean block letters. It's not over. Inside was a photo. Thomas's face. And someone was watching him. Asterisk. Thomas sat at the small kitchen table. The letter unfolded in front of him. The photo placed carefully beside it like evidence in a quiet courtroom. He stared at his own face captured. In the grainy image walking out of the housing center, holding a paper bag with lunch, unaware that someone somewhere had been watching. The shadows in the photo weren't just on the sidewalk. They pressed into his mind, creeping like old ghosts that didn't want to stay buried. Mike sat across from him, chewing nervously on his thumb. What does it mean? Mike asked, voice low. Thomas didn't answer right away. He just kept staring at the 3 words scrawled in thick ink. It's not over. Something about it felt different than Derek. More deliberate. Colder. Derek had been angry. This felt calculated. This felt like a warning. Or maybe a threat. We need to tell someone, Mike said. Maybe Sundar. Thomas nodded slowly. Not yet. Not until we know more. But even as he said the words, he knew something had already shifted. The piece he had built, brick by careful brick, suddenly felt shaky. He couldn't explain it, but he felt it deep in his bones. The past had opened its eyes again. And this time, it wasn't just watching. It was coming. The next few days passed with unease. Thomas still went to work. But he was distracted. He checked over his shoulder more often. He scanned faces in the crowd. At night, he double-locked his door and kept the photo on his desk like a question no one could answer. He didn't tell Elena. Not yet. He didn't want to worry her. He didn't tell his therapist either. Part of him didn't want to admit how much it was affecting him, but Mike noticed. You haven't eaten, Mike said one night, pushing a plate of food toward him. Not hungry. You're thinking about the letter. I'm thinking about a lot of things. Mike leaned forward, elbows on the table. Who do you think it is? I don't know, Thomas said. Well, I think they do. Do what? No. What I used to be. Mike frowned. Doesn't matter what you used to be. It does if they want to remind everyone. Mike was quiet for a moment. Then he said, You helped me. You didn't owe me anything. And if you can come back from where you were then, I can too. And whoever that letter's from, they don't get to take that away. Thomas looked at him, and he realized something. Mike believed in him now. Not because of the thing Sundar did. Not because of the program, but because Thomas had shown up every day, quietly, consistently. He was becoming the kind of person others leaned on. And that meant whoever sent that letter was right about one thing, that it wasn't over. Because the higher you rise, the more people want to test how far you'll fall. A week later, it happened again. This time. It wasn't a letter. It was a fire. The housing center's laundry room had been set ablaze just before midnight. Smoke curled through the vents. Fire alarms screamed. Thomas was one of the first to smell it, and he rushed through the halls, banging on doors, waking people up. Everyone got out safely. No one was hurt. But the damage was done. The fire marshal Said it looked like arson. Deliberate. Thomas stood in the parking lot with other residents, watching smoke rise into the night sky, black against the stars. And then you saw it taped to the front door. Another note. No envelope this time. Just a single sheet. This place isn't for you. Mike saw it too. He pulled it down quickly, crumpled it, looked around. Someone's targeting you, he said. Thomas didn't argue. He COULDN single quotes T. Because now the danger wasn't just a whisper. It had become real. Elena called the next morning. I heard about the fire, she said, her voice tight with concern. Are you okay? We're safe, Thomas said. Everyone got out. But something else happened, didn't it? He didn't answer right away. Thomas, she said softly. You can trust me. So he told her about the photo. The note. The fire. And the message on the door. When he finished, there was silence on the line. We need to get you out of there, she said. Both of you. I'm not running again. This isn't running. It's repositioning. By sunset, arrangements had been made. Thomas and Mike were moved to a safe location. An empty apartment owned by one of Sundar's trusted partners. Plain furniture, clean beds, stocked fridge. But no name on the mailbox. No public listing. Mike stood at the window, looking out. So what now? Now, Thomas said, we find out who's behind this. Because he had decided something that night, as he watched the fire twist in the dark. Was tired of being hunted. He wanted answers. And he wanted the past to stop controlling the future. He started digging. Reached out to people from his old life. Quietly, cautiously. A few still answered. A man named Caleb who used to run security at the warehouse. A woman named Tasha who once worked admin and remembered everything. Slowly. A pattern began to emerge. Someone had been asking about Thomas. Months ago, that long before. He met Sundar. They weren't asking because they wanted to help. They were asking because Thomas had walked away from something. A man named Raymond. A name. Thomas hadn't heard in years. Someone he owed. Someone dangerous. Someone who didn't forget. And now Raymond wanted what he believed was his. But Thomas didn't know what. That was. Money. Revenge? Or something worse? That night, Thomas sat on the edge of his bed. The city lights flickering in the distance. Mike was asleep. The apartment was silent. And Thomas stared at his reflection in the window. A man no longer homeless. No longer invisible. But still not free. He picked up his notebook. And for the first time in weeks, he wrote again. Dear Sundar, I don't know if I've earned all of this, but I'm trying to protect it. Protect the person I'm becoming. Someone from my past is back, and I don't know what they want. But I'm not afraid. I'm not who I used to be. And I won't let him take that away. Thomas, as he closed the notebook, a knock echoed through the quiet apartment. Soft. Barely. Bare. But Thomas knew. No one was supposed to know where they were. He stood up slowly, walked to the door. His hand hovered over the knob. And he asked himself one question. Was this the moment that would break him or make him stronger than ever? Asterisk. The knock came again. Slow, patient, like it wasn't in a hurry to be answered. Thomas stood at the door, his hand frozen just inches from the handle. On the other side was silence. Not the kind of silence that feels peaceful, but the kind that breathes, watches, waits. He turned his head slightly, eyes scanning the living room. Mike was still asleep on the couch, one arm draped across his chest, unaware of the tension creeping through the room. Thomas took a breath, deep, slow. His heart was beating like a drum. Not from fear, but from decision. He opened the door. The hallway was empty. Except for a small envelope on the floor. No name. No stamp. Just a simple symbol drawn in black ink. Circle with 3 short lines extending from the center. Thomas picked it up. He opened it slowly. Inside was a folded piece of paper. And beneath it, a key. The paper read, "You owe him. We haven't forgotten. Come alone. 451 Brannan Street. Midnight." No threats. No signature. Just instructions. Thomas looked down at the key. It was small, silver, worn around the edges. Not new, not clean. It had been used maybe by many hands. Maybe just one. He stood in the hallway for a long time, reading the note over and over until the words felt like ash in his mouth. He didn't wake Mike. He couldn't. This wasn't his brother's burden to carry Dot. This was his Dot. Thomas spent the rest of the day preparing, though he wasn't sure for what. He packed a small bag of water, a phone, a photo of his mother he'd carried for years. He dressed plainly. Dark hoodie, comfortable shoes, nothing to draw attention. At 11:45 p.m., he left the apartment. The city was quiet, tucked into its own sleep, windows glowing like stars caught between concrete. He walked with his head low, heart steady, the note folded in his pocket like a map leading him into the past. Brannan Street was a forgotten strip of warehouses near the docks. Chain link fences, graffiti, the occasional flickering light. It smelled of rust, sea salt, and the kind of decay no one talks about. He found the address. An old storage unit. The door was cracked open. He stepped inside. The air was cold. Still, a single hanging light bulb cast a soft glow over the room, and beneath it stood a man. He was tall, lean, dressed in black. His name was Raymond. Thomas recognized him instantly, even after all these years. He hadn't aged much, but his eyes had hardened, the kind of eyes that remembered every debt, every betrayal, every ounce of control once lost. "You came," Raymond said. Thomas nodded. "I came alone." Raymond gestured toward a folding chair. "Sit." Thomas sat. The door creaked shut behind him. And suddenly they were sealed inside a moment that had been waiting for too long. "You vanished," Raymond said. "Just disappeared like a coward." "I was broken," Thomas said. "You owed me," Raymond snapped. "Money, time, loyalty. I owed myself more." Raymond's expression didn't change. He walked slowly around the room like a predator circling prey. But Thomas didn't flinch. "You think you're better now?" Raymond asked. "I think I'm honest," Thomas said. Raymond reached into his coat, and Thomas tensed, but Raymond didn't pull a weapon. He pulled a folder, dropped it on the table between them. Inside were photos. Documents. Files. Thomas single quotes S life. From the shelters. The job training center. Asterisk. His work schedule. Even a copy of his first paycheck. "You think you're invisible?" Raymond said. "You're not. You've been following me. I've been watching to see if you're worth what you took." Thomas leaned forward, and Raymond paused. Then, for the first time, his expression cracked only slightly. "You're not who you were." Thomas didn't respond. "But neither am I," Raymond continued. He pulled another envelope from his coat. Thinner, older. He placed it on the table. "This," he said, "is the real reason you're here?" Thomas opened it slowly. Inside was a handwritten letter. His mother's handwriting. His breath caught. It was dated 2 weeks before her death. He read, asterisk, Thomas. "If you ever come back, if you ever find this, I forgive you. I know you were hurting. I know you didn't mean to disappear. Life has a way of breaking the people who care too much. But it also has a way of bringing them back. If you're reading this, you're not lost anymore. And that means everything. Love, Mom, asterisk. Tears welled up. Raymond didn't speak. Asterisk, he let the silence hold the truth. Thomas looked up, his voice shaking. "How did you get this?" "She gave it to me," Raymond said. "Told me to give it to you if I ever saw you again. I didn't think I would. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I hated you," Raymond said. "But now, maybe, I don't." They sat in silence for a long time. Two men, two lives tangled in regret. Then Raymond stood. "I don't want your money," he said. "Not anymore. But I needed to see who you were now." Thomas stood too. "And you're a man who asked for $1 and gave back 100 more. Thomas didn't speak. He just nodded. Raymond turned and walked to the door. Before leaving, he said one last thing. "Don't waste what you've become." Asterisk. Then he disappeared into the night. Thomas walked home under a sky that seemed wider than before. When he returned, Mike was waiting. eyes red from worry. Where were you? Closing a door, Thomas said. Mike didn't press further. Instead. They sat in silence for a while, side by side. Two survivors with a future neither thought they'd earn. A few days later, Thomas got a call. From Sundar. How are you feeling? Sundar asked, like the past finally let go. It never lets go, Sundar said. But we learn how to carry it differently. I want to do something, Thomas said. I want to give back. Then you're ready, Sundar replied. Let's begin. And so they did.